You
Right.
know, but so, so anyway, how's your day been?
Not bad. Just driving around all day. So
Yeah.
saw
I like,
saw a train hit a little Prius in East downtown Portland. So he must have turned. I think he turned the wrong way because because the Prius got T-boned by the trolley.
right.
So yeah.
Well, what's a typical day for Todd in Portland? Like, what do you like? What do you do generally
Just
speaking?
doing
You
the
have
doing the, just doing the DoorDash thing. So
Oh, is that your job?
yeah, I lost both my jobs in California when COVID happened, and then we moved up here anyway. So because
Right,
we lost our house as well. So yeah.
right. So you've been down in Portland for how long now?
Now, when did we? About a year and a half, probably. We moved into our house in July, but we'd been there for a year before that in like a rental
Right,
while we were house shopping. So
right. And I think I remember the first time I tried to interview you. I didn't really have any concept of where you were living. I thought
uh,
for whatever that you were still living. I don't know, in Ohio or near Detroit or whatever, and you told me
we moved
that you
we
moved
moved
away
to,
a time ago.
to California about 16 years ago. Then we just moved up here a couple years ago.
Okay, got it. Do you ever like talk to people that you haven't seen in 30 years and they think that you still live in Ohio or something?
Uh, you maybe just you. You might be the only one. I don't know.
Right, right. Because like I did a little investigating. You've done a few interviews in the last couple of years. I've noticed, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the first question I was wondering, when people talk to you, they generally ask you about stuff that happened 30 years ago for the most part.
Uh, for the most part, yes, I would agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Well,
20 years ago, maybe 20.
20 for Laughing Hyenas, 30 plus years ago for Necros.
Unless
And
unless it's an interview with someone from Toledo, because most of my musical things going on were in Toledo for the last 15 years at least. So
right, right. Huh. Um,
that band broke up though, like maybe 3 4 years ago. So fine. I was back in Toledo like 4 or 5 times a year,
okay,
probably from just to play in that band. So
right. Okay. Now you're known primarily for being a drummer for a long time. As far as drumming these days, because I play drums too, but there's been massive gaps in me playing. I mean, I'd like to play more, but um, I'm a little pickier, and also I just don't have a lot of time. So like, it's almost like I'm just waiting for the right opportunity.
yeah.
Are you somebody that do you practice regularly, like every day or every other
No.
day, or
Oh hell no. Yeah, right. Though the drum set's about 2 miles away at the rehearsal space. So
so you're not going to get in the car after we talk and go down there and say goodbye
nah,
to wife and go, I have to go do some woodshedding, honey.
nope, I'm good.
No,
So
because like I'll talk to some people that play drums and they're serious drummers and they play all the time regardless of if whether they're in a band or not. And they're very serious about it, and I would never make fun of that, but that's just like I think I realized a long time ago that I was just more than fine with my limitations, and that
right, yeah.
and that that generally it would even if I was rusty, it would take maybe just one or two times playing behind the kit, and I can still do this, like muscle memory and whatever that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe play for like 10 minutes if I happen to go to the rehearsal space and just to get something or right. So, but not, yeah. I mean, I get some good licks in the car, as you could imagine, on the steering wheel and so.
Oh yeah, of course. But are you the kind of drummer that's always tapping on things and just like?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like I have a table in front of me, and if I was just not paying attention, I would just be
right.
trying to talk or whatever. How long ago? I think I read an interview that, and I think this also came up last time I talked to you, where you said your mom was a music teacher in school.
Yeah.
And were exposed to music at an early age, and you were like, I think you got your first drum kit before you were 10 years old. Or am I wrong in saying that?
Probably 6 or 7, maybe. They had found me. I had gone out in the garage and turned all the trash cans upside down, and put a stool in the middle, and was like playing the drum with screwdrivers. Yeah. So after I think I got exposed to Buddy Rich like pretty early, like on television. So that was the ultimate drummer to be exposed to. So
yeah, talk about aiming high, right. Here's the best drummer that ever existed in the
right.
Yeah, I used to remember like those old wire, like when you hang, what are they called? When you would hang clothes, wire hangers, and there'd be like that, like sort of like cardboard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they don't make those anymore. So I would arrange pillows and stuff on my parents' couch, and I would just use those until I would break. And then there was chopsticks collection that my parents had, so I would switch to chopsticks, which seemed more like actual drums, and but I didn't start playing until like 10th grade, but I was always doing that. And then I sat behind the kit for the first time, and I just realized, oh, I can actually do this. Was that your experience? Did all that tapping pay off? Did you know right away that you could be a drummer? Because usually that's what happens when people get behind the kit for the first time and they realize they can coordinate their snare hit with their kick drum foot, that, oh yeah, I can do this. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, but I got a toy kit after that. I never figured out what the kick pedal was until at some point, I don't know, at some point a light went off in my head. I'm like, oh, but that was way later, probably when I saw, like, I don't know, because they're not television drummers, they're not showing the foot. You don't know what's going on, right? It's like they're just, you're going like blah blah blah, like doing that whole stuff, and like I'm like, and I think the kick pedal, I got a real set after I destroyed the toy kit,
which you did in like one afternoon, I'm sure.
It had a kick pedal with it, I remember, but the leather strap was broken.
Right.
It was an old Rogers with like a leather strap on the foot pedal, so we just didn't bother to fix it. But I didn't know what that was for anyway, so I don't know what did I think that the big drum down where your feet are was for? Just to hold everything, right? That's like
what I thought. Also, when I realized what that meant, where that pedal was, I was like, how the hell? I remember thinking, how do I do that?
So then you got to rethink everything, because you're like, oh, now I got to incorporate my feet into it, right?
Yeah, right. I was like, I remember thinking, I'm never going to be able to do that in a million fucking years. And I even thought about, well, maybe I can just turn the bass drum on the side. And then years later, when I got more into music, I realized, oh, that's what Maureen Tucker did of the Velvet Underground, But that was the first thing I thought. I just thought, I'm never going to be able to fucking do this. And,
and I was probably about, you remember the Brady Bunch, Bobby Brady episode?
Right.
Yeah. I was probably just about the same age as Bobby when I saw that on television. And of course, everybody like looked at me when when we were watching the show. We're like,
Right. I thought about this a lot, about whenever people in our age bracket, when they got, I think besides you seeing Buddy Rich, was there any sort of moment that happened, like a light bulb moment, sort of like a I guess the equivalent would be for people 10 years older than us watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, or and then watching that and going, that's what I'm going to do. Besides seeing Buddy Rich and Bobby Brady, tearing it up.
Right.
And with the idea of you're getting into rock music, was there any moment of seeing somebody besides Buddy Rich that was more of a, I don't want to say a younger person, but somebody that was kind of like, because my moment was like watching, and I always say this and people laugh, but it was basically seeing Kiss on Paul Lynde Hall special.
Probably Kiss, because, that was like, I was probably what year was that? Like 74?
That was December of 1976.
76. So I was like, well, that though. But Kiss had been around for a couple years before that.
I think a couple of years. I was like, I was thinking about it today. I was going through I've been going through a really big Alice Cooper bender the last couple of days.
Yeah. Yes.
And I realized that like my entry into rock music and drumming was Kiss Alive, Peter Criss. But at that point, the original Alice Cooper group I was too young to really, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, obviously I could have been exposed to that if I had wanted to, but I just kind of missed the boat on the original Alice Cooper group, who obviously were, really, really good, and had an incredible drummer. So I feel like next in line was seeing Kiss. So that was kind of like and obviously that's pre-punk rock or whatever and that kind of thing. So you said it was that, and that's also that's
seeing somebody though. But I mean, before that, I was already buying records when I was 9 or 10. I mean, my first 4 records I bought with my own money were like Volume 4.
That's 9 years old. A girl buying
made I was about 10. Just these records had just came out. So it was like 73.
Did that record scare the shit out of you?
That record?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know this. I knew I liked it. We'd already been exposed to Black Sabbath we were listening to MC5, when I had a 45 would kick out the jams when I was like, 6, 7, something like that.
Wow.
We wore that thing out. I do still have it.
Right. Was the whole Detroit thing as you were growing up, like just what had happened nearby, like the Stooges, the MC5, and I guess later when Alice Cooper, the original group, moved there, and even the first Ted Nugent record on Epic Records was there's a lot of influence during that time period, and you guys didn't live very far away from all that stuff. Did you grow up knowing just how pivotal all that stuff was, or was it sort of this little secret that you and a few of your trusted friends had and no one else seemed to know about it?
Well, my brother bought those records when they came out in 69. He's about 5 years older than me.
Okay.
So he was like, what? I was like 7 in 69 and he was, just a teenager. So the right age to be buying those records. Right.
Yeah.
So, I'd heard that stuff, since, for a while. So we just knew him and I were always we seemed to like very heavy music. Whereas my sisters were more into, like whatever was on the radio.
Joni Mitchell?
I'm thinking more like the Eagles in Boston and shit like that. Yeah. Like a little later. Before that, though, I mean, what?
Or Nero?
Yeah. I mean, my sister we used to play that Kick Out the Jams like on 78 and do this freak out thing on the bed. It's just like go nuts. You can imagine. I mean, the record's hyper enough at the normal speed. And then you crank it up and down and like, ah!
Right. Okay. So you were a skateboarder, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time you got on the board?
A few months ago.
Wow.
Yeah, my knees are a little shot. Plus, I got to be able to play drums, so it's like
you don't want to break your arm.
I got lots of excuses. I can still roll down the street, or drop into a pool and carve maybe if I don't. The problem is like jumping off. Yeah, inevitably you got to like run something out, right? Or fall. Better to run it out than fall. But if you got a bad knee, you know, you're not going to be running shit out when you're on vert. So, yeah, so I'm, whatever.
Yeah. I was too uncoordinated. I always liked skateboarding or the idea of it. And especially later as it sort of fed into punk rock and whatever, beyond all those times, but I just wasn't good at it. I wanted to be, and I noticed that a lot of people met each other through skateboarding, and that led to people forming their first, kind of garagey punk rock kind of bands. You met the rest of the Necros guys through skateboarding?
Pretty much that or church. So Corey and I went to the same church that I did.
Nice.
Andy lived down the street from the church and hung out there just for whatever, because he had other friends. I met Andy through other friends from the church. Basically his neighbors, his people that he hung out in the neighborhood. And
you mean hanging out at the church like, hey, we believe in God and we're here to, or was it just
no, it was just something to do on a Sunday. I had to, most of us had to go anyway. I think Andy would wander over there with his friend John that went to church. So it was pretty liberal church as far as, we had, the kids we didn't have to go to the service, or we did for part of it, but then we were allowed to leave, right, and go do the whole youth group thing, right, which was just kind of out. Half the time, whoever was in charge of us didn't even show up, right, so we were just kind of left with our own. I remember being very mischievous at church. Like we would wander around a lot, or we'd go skip church, like we were skipping school or something. Like go bail and go down to there was a path down by the river. We'd kind of go hang out or whatever, just to kind of, get away from the church. So
break up the monotony and personally want to do, but not trying to upset your parents in the process.
I stopped going when the minister was having an affair with the youth group leader. They would take us to ski, a weekend skiing and just disappear. So we were just all these underage kids left to their own
devices.
Who's in charge of us? I don't know. Where did they go?
So the Necros started in 1970 something.
I'm going to say the idea,
right. Guys were
78, right around the time when Sid Vicious died. Probably in the back of my mom's car on the way back from the skate park. We decided we were going to start a band. So, and then
might as well.
We probably talked about it for a year before we actually started trying to play. So
it was you and Andy, Barry, and you went through a few different bass players.
Yeah, David Cook was the first bass player, but then he had to go off to college, so he bailed.
Right, his parents were smart.
Yes, right. He was kind of the ringleader. Actually, he's the one that kind of started the band, really,
and then he jumped off.
And we threw names around. Circle Jerks was actually thrown around as a name.
I think I read that somewhere, actually.
Very juvenile. But then I think Barry came up with Necros. So we're like, Chris, we were like, what's that mean? He's like, fuck the dead. We're like, sweet. And as long as the parents would hate it, was kind of our,
My favorite thing about walking around, I had a few Necros homemade t-shirts in my day. And my favorite thing about walking around with Necro shirts, and I know you've heard this before, you've had to hear it before, is how many times people would take a look at the word Necros and not quite pay attention to it and think that it's saying Negroes.
Of course, right.
What's that supposed to mean? It's Necros.
Oh, right. Well, they had to, So we played with on the Megadeth tour in Detroit at Harpo's, which was a heavily black neighborhood. So they actually put it. They spelled it Neck Grows because they didn't want to have windows, So NECKGROWS was on the marquee even.
Awesome.
We're like, yeah, we totally understood why they did that too.
Oh yeah, of course. So you avoided a potential heavy metal race riot at the show,
right? Basically, yeah. I mean, this club's right at 8 Mile and Warren, right off pretty much right on the border of the Burbs and the Hood. So
yeah, you don't want to cut
all about 8 Mile from Eminem. So
right. So are you amazed that people like me and other people want to talk about stuff that happened so long ago? And do you have any theory? I think I asked you this the first time I talked to you, but I always ask this to people that had the same sort of experience. It was a long time ago, and people are still really interested and talk about these things in super glowing, legendary terms, like it was this punk rock, paradise or whatever. But they don't realize that it was also a really small thing, and that there was, not a lot of people, and not a lot of, what they consider to be some amazing golden time, and it was, but it was like not. There just wasn't a lot of people. It was just this really great moment in time, and people are still reeling from that moment. Do you have any reason why you think people are still so invested in that kind of stuff?
Nostalgia, and then it really wasn't documented back then, at least not on written down and stuff. But as far as now we have social media and stuff, so I think people want to hear it from the source maybe rather than read about it. Everybody's read about it ad nauseum, but
everybody has their punk rock. Yeah, everybody has their punk rock memory book. I know I had mine, so
exactly. So
does that have does any of that stuff that happened back then and what you're doing musically, does that influence anything that you're about musically, or to you is it all just, well, this is all music I like and I was able to do this back then? I just look at it because I just look at it like music I like. I never looked at it like, well, this is my special thing and this is my time, and before it sucks, everything after it sucks. It's this. This is how I define myself. I remember meeting you guys, and you guys, were pretty open-minded sort of people, and you were some of the first people to kind of, I guess, move away from the early fame of punk rock hardcore. I guess, right? And what would you say for you guys? We're skipping some time. We're skipping the Sex Drive record. We're skipping the was it a 9-song 7-inch half released on Discord?
32 was next after that. Then the album Conquest was after that.
Right. And that was half recorded in LA with Spot and half done.
Yeah.
So what was I always say this, that eventually people just go, well, I like music more than I like defining myself as any of this stuff. And you guys always struck me as being like that too. Would you say 1983 was the turning point of just, we're just going to try to do our own thing, and that?
It was probably right around there, 83, 84.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we were on tour a lot. We toured like twice or 3 times for Conquest for Death because we didn't have a record label anyway.
Right.
So, we did that initial tour with the Misfits with Corey, but then we did 3 other tours with Ron before Tangled Up and all that.
Right. Did Conquest for Death come out when Corey was still in the band?
Yes. Yeah.
So he quit right after that?
Yeah.
Did he ever give a reason why he just was done? Or if that's something you would actually want to talk about.
Yeah, he never gave a reason really, but we knew the reason. So just girlfriend, basically. Like, she wanted to come on tour, I think. And we were like, we're not going to take your girlfriend on tour. Like, yeah, it was kind of like, yeah. I mean, he went on the first, that was after the first tour. So, of course, now we were going to go on a big tour. So it says he played on the Misfits. He obviously he played on the Misfits tour because we recorded half the album out there. Yeah, I mean, then he after he quit, he wanted to get back in.
Why did he have a heart? I wonder.
Well, I don't know, right? Because he'd been in the band a couple of years at that point, so he was our most steady bass player at that point. So, yeah, we were like kind of like, well, Ron we already practiced with Ron about 2 or 3 times at that point when he wanted to rejoin, and we were like, Ron quit his job basically so he can go on tour. So you want to talk to Ron about it?
That's all very reasonable. And was Ron just some kid that you guys knew from going to shows and stuff?
Just Detroit. Yeah, he was in a couple bands up in Detroit that we had seen. So,
all right. You brought up the Misfits, and I know that for that period, you guys were sort of like their little brother band, kind of.
It seems like for a couple of years, it seems, probably.
Yeah. What do you think?
Did a lot of shows with them.
Yeah. Do you have a good humorous Misfit story that you can?
Irving Plaza.
What is that?
Irving Plaza, where I had to play 2 sets.
You did?
Yeah, Necros. It was Misfits, Necros, Beastie Boys was the bill. You've seen the poster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I played the Necros set, and then I got to play the Misfits set after that.
Pretty exciting.
What now? Oh, it was awesome. But I mean, first song, I get hit on the head with a full beer can.
Nice.
Right. It's Bobby Steele's up in the balcony, like throwing beer cans at his old band. They're bouncing off a chest. He's just like, Danzig's like, get that motherfucker. Like,
okay, that's right. Bobby Steele was the player before.
Yeah, sent their bouncer up there. This big ex-Marine, this guy Paulie B, who was an ex-Marine, like big giant guy. He basically grabbed Bobby and threw him down like 3 or 4 flights of steps into the street. It was pretty gnarly, apparently. So, but I didn't miss a beat with the headshot. So,
that
that hurt. I do remember that. I remember it hurt. It was pretty. I mean, get hit. You've been hit with a full can before, right? It's like, ouch.
Yeah.
I had a pretty thick skull, so apparently.
So they lost their drummer before that show, or was he sick, or they kicked him
out? He had quit like a couple months before, I think.
Googie, was that his name? Googie?
Arthur Googie, that drummer. It was the Walk Among Us drummer.
Right.
So they hadn't gotten Robo yet, and they didn't have a drummer really. So we just went a little early. I think we spent an afternoon going through the set like 5 or 6 times, and we were good to go. So
I can't imagine playing Misfit songs from Walk Among Us or the era before that is going to be a particularly challenging thing, but I'm sure it's a lot of fun.
I already knew the songs by heart anyway. Right. It was like some of them they did a little, like Horror Business was totally played differently. So
how were you able to tell like what one song from the next? Because I never saw them.
Yeah.
And I love the records, and I know you have a different opinion probably of this, but I even like Earth AD, even though it's basically you can't really tell from any of those videos what they're playing at all. So how did you even know? I mean, are those old videos that people look at? Are they that indicative of how they were live? Because live, it just sounds like a complete ball of noise. Like and the bass especially. You know, you just can't tell what's going on. Were you able to tell each song from the
Yeah,
next
they
one?
were playing that loud at that point and not that fast. So,
Okay.
and I was kind of a stickler for keeping I would pretty much do the same tempo as the album, right? Like I wouldn't speed it up really, which I don't know if they liked that or not. They were probably kind of into upping the tempo a little bit. But not as bad. I mean, they were playing thrash. I think we did "Mommy" was the only really thrash song. Yeah. I actually played it correctly, but that's just yeah.
Oh yeah, that cheating, the cheating beat. You just can't.
The hardcore cheater beat. Yeah, it's
you go instead of don't.
Like what?
I noticed that in current punk rock and hardcore, they do a different version of cheating.
Oh, they do. You're right. Yeah. And they got the cheater pedal as well. So
yeah,
right. So
they used to call that chopping the steak and running the place.
Yeah, I've seen that. I know what you're talking about. It is kind of like
somebody turkey or something.
Yeah.
So after Corey quits, they're not wilderness years, but you guys were working on what eventually would be the Tangled Up record and the material. You put out that 7-inch that had Tangled Up and the Pink Floyd song. And then I guess you kind of went on a couple of tours, and one tour was with the Circle Jerks, I think you said, and then the other one was the one I saw you guys.
Megadeth first, and then 2 months with Megadeth.
Uh-huh.
And we took like a month off, and then 2 more months with the Circle Jerks. So,
right.
Like 86, I think was the.
Right. And then you just kind of called it a day. And you said, you said that
we got home and we knew we were going to break up. I think, pretty sure.
Nobody was too upset about it.
Right, because we got rejected by Elektra. Basically, we wanted to get signed by Elektra, which would have been jumping labels because we were in contract to Restless, which of course is owned by Enigma, which is a subsidiary of Capitol, right?
Right.
So we wanted to be on Elektra because of Stooges, basically, all that stuff. We were talking to the guy from Elektra on the Megadeth bus in San Francisco. We gave him a tape of Tangled Up, and apparently James Hetfield stole it from that guy. So the Elektra guy never even heard it because he didn't have it, because Hetfield swiped it from him on the bus. So because Hetfield wanted it. So we never even that. So we ended up kind of just. I think we came home from the Circle Jerks tour. Then we recorded that fake live album because we were still contracted to them for another record.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then we did one last show in Detroit, and that was it. So.
And then you just kind of moved on. And what kind of did you pack away your drums for a while, or did you immediately start playing with other people?
I was living in Columbus,
Ohio.
At that point, yeah. Okay. So I think I started a band almost maybe a couple months after we broke up. I think that lasted like a year or so. Then that band broke up. Then I moved back to Toledo. I had a couple bands there, but then in 1990 I ended up in the Hyenas. So
how did that happen? How did they come to ask you to replace Jim Kimball?
Well, those guys had quit. They were already had Mule. Mule was already happening anyway, but they just kind of bailed. And then I just got a call from Brandon at some point, and we just started with Larissa. Larissa was still in Florida,
right?
So we just kind of started jamming. At first, we did one show as the as the John Brandon Blues Experiment, basically. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Glenn Danzig Hotline.
Yeah, we did. We did like one show with as that, and then Larissa came back, and then we just started like basically writing like new material and learning a set, getting a set down. So
yeah, all right. Was that pretty exciting to be able to step in? You were obviously a fan of the band.
Yeah, well, yeah. Though I'll say I was a little intimidated by having to play his stuff.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. He was a monster drummer.
I mean, we don't play it all alike at all. So, like,
he also plays with traditional grip.
He does, yeah.
Which is weird when you think about how hard he hits, and
right.
How do you do that? How do you learn how to do that? It seemed like it'd be kind of difficult. And I think that
I eventually learned those songs on my own terms, and then we had new songs anyway. So, you know.
And then Ron joined a little bit later. I think you said that they found a bass player, and he's on the Crawl EP. But then I think you said
other Kevin Reese.
Yeah.
He played on Crawl, but then he basically quit after the record came out. Or before the record came out, because they didn't. She was like, I don't want his picture. Larissa didn't want his picture on the back of it. So it's just the three of us, yeah, without the bass player. So,
right,
yeah. Once again, he wanted to bring his girlfriend on tour, basically as the T-shirt chick.
Bass players and girlfriends.
We were like, no. Yeah, right. That was probably Larissa. Larissa was probably like, hell no. It's like we don't take girlfriends on tour.
Right.
Otherwise, everybody's allowed to do it, right? So if one girlfriend can come, then they all can. Like, it's
it's a healthy thing. And how long were the album was Hard Times, right?
Yep.
Okay, and that was a few years after you joined, and then was it like a 5-year period of you being in the band?
91 to 96. Yeah.
It just kind of petered to a closing, like this was over.
Yeah, it kind of just yeah. I mean, it was just time to end it, pretty much. So
I always think it's. I like the record that you play on. I mean, I like all the records. I think actually the first record is the one I like the least for whatever reason, the merry-go-round record.
Yeah.
But then the three afterwards and the EP, I like all that stuff. It's kind of funny because John, this is just my observation, like the fact that Negative Approach are banned now and they're doing all this stuff and they're playing to this whole new audience of people that really like it. And then I think when some of those people hear the Laughing Hyenas, they don't know what to make of it, or they think it's like this kind of lacking arty kind of band. Like maybe they don't understand the reference points
because of the Negative Approach connection, basically, right?
Yeah,
they're checking it out.
Yeah, they're checking it out because they like Negative. And, I like Negative Approach as much as anyone, but the Laughing Hyenas are just like a ferocious, there's nothing, there's nothing like. I don't understand how you could, I guess, go from liking hardcore to not appreciating bands like the Laughing Hyenas. It just seems like a logical step.
Yeah, they kind of got that. They got that a lot in the beginning. I mean, it was all like, "Oh, Brandon's got a new band," right? So all these skinheads came and checked out the Hyenas at first, right? And it's like, nope. John had grown his hair out at that point, and it's still. I'm still gonna say it's punk rock, but
yeah. Well,
It's not
like,
not hardcore, right? So
well, especially now, it's like, I don't follow stuff anymore, really. I don't feel like a part of anything. And like I said earlier, to me, all that stuff is just, well, it's fine. That's just more music I like because I like music
right.
more
So,
than more than I like. Well, I'm a punk or I'm a this or just how people always have to label themselves and put themselves in boxes. Does that make it? And you're just like, well, what about just liking music? And yeah, I don't pay attention to that stuff anymore. I just always looked at it like, fine, more music for me to like. If I like it, I don't care.
I guess kids probably still do like marginalize everything like that. Probably
I
like,
think,
oh,
well,
he's into disco or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, like, um,
Though
yeah,
maybe I don't think people with long hair aren't getting beaten up anymore like at punk shows. So just because they have long hair, right? So that was always a very
yeah, it was weird. I think that's kind of what attracted me to Black Flag as time went on, is because they just looked like,
said
you know,
fuck it.
yeah, they didn't have triple mohawks. They don't look like Waddy from the Exploited or whatever.
Right.
They
Right.
didn't have costume, and I don't know. I mean, like I always looked the way I looked, and instinct. I knew right away that I just wasn't going to look like, the costume just did not. The music appealed to me, but the costume and the roles didn't really appeal to me, and I knew I just wasn't going to look convincing with a triple mohawk, and it's not kind of done.
I, I was just shaving my head anyway, but I think I kind of dropped that whole uniform thing maybe like 82 and just started wearing like, I didn't wear,
Whenever,
I just started wearing thrift store clothes and Vans. So, right. So I could skate, you could skate whenever. Before you were, maybe like jack boots or something, but I at some points I ditched the boots and
I
just
never
started,
had, I never
yeah.
had stuff ever. I don't know why. I mean, I just was in the. I guess I was in the wrong place. I could have and should have had it, but I just never.
I mean, I pretty much wanted to be I pretty much was the skank man.
The
Like,
Circle Jerk Man,
yeah,
that was
1981. That's pretty much a chain belt, jack boots and spurs and bandanas and no hair. So, but I moved on at some point. So then we went for kind of the Black Flag thrift store thing, right?
oh,
Yeah,
that appealed to me. These guys
totally.
just other guys, like, and
Right.
because I really took, at first I didn't know what to think because I just took everything at face value. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that everybody was basically a dork like me. You know, I just thought there was this upper level of whatever coolness, and then I realized way that was not the case at all. These people were as big a dork as I was, And then I think Black Flag, by the having the yeah, I don't really care what people look like, but
Right.
back then, figuring all that stuff out, I thought, well, I have to do this and I have to do that, and then I looked at like Des Cadena growing out his hair, and they all look
Right.
like. And I remember just going, okay, that makes sense to me, and so I just kind of went with that, I guess. And the Necros had some of that as well. Ron with his super long hair, and then Barry grew out his hair, and he looked like Danny Bonaducci on acid or whatever.
Ron showed up. Ron showed up. He already had long hair, so he'd already been growing it out for like a couple of years. So, and that was like 1983.
Right.
So, right. But I remember I met Ron at where did we meet Ron? The Devo show in '78 in Detroit.
Yeah.
Where he had like red spiky hair and a Sex Pistols logo on the back of his leather. So like, this kid looks cool. Like, yeah.
Instant friend. Remember that time when you would see somebody, and if they liked something you liked, you'd think, because it was so small, and that you were like, I can be friends with that guy. Whereas now, call somebody with a Misfits anything, you'd be like, it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It's just different. I don't know how else to put it. It's just different. Let me ask you a few more questions, and I'll let you go because it's been about an hour. But thanks again. I appreciate.
No worries.
Yeah, I think this went a lot better than the first time, and I can hear everything.
Yeah, it's not jumping. You can tell.
Not jumping. Yeah. So I have to ask you. I know we talked about ancient history, but the question that 30 people across the country my age always want to know: why or why not is the Necro stuff ever going to be reissued on Touch and Go?
I don't know. At this point, I cannot tell you. I was told. I talked to Corey last. When was it? Yeah, probably a year ago, and said he wanted to reissue everything for the 40th anniversary of it getting released, the Conquest stuff. And he said he wanted to put it out in the fall, and of course that didn't happen. So I don't know. I haven't talked to him. Other than that, I imagine it was because Barry was always Barry was the whole stickler and thing. Barry didn't want it to come out on Touch and Go because Corey would get paid twice, right? Basically, because he'd be on the record, some of them, not all of them.
First
so right, because and he's also runs the record label. So yeah, Barry wasn't into that. So Barry was always keen to have it on a third label. Corey didn't want to do that because he runs Touch and Go record, right? Why not put it out? So pretty much I'm going to chalk it up because Andy and I don't care. We're like, or Brian and Brian either. So we're like sure, put everything out. I'll agree to anything.
So it's like a matter of pride at this point. Like, who the hell cares?
Yeah, pretty much.
So let me ask you one last thing.
Certainly.
It's about I think you brought this up before. You are still playing drums, or you're going to, in a classic Portland band that isn't Poison Idea. And before we get to that, how'd you not end up in Poison Idea during the end of their career?
I tried. I did try after. But I think the Hippie Slayer was already deceased. And I think I'm like, Jerry, you need a drummer. But then I end up in Lockjaw. So
yeah.
I think Poison Idea is pretty much done. I don't think he's going to do anything. Doesn't seem like it.
I'm trying to get,
especially after Tom. I mean, Tom, and then the Hippie Slayer. Is it the Slayer Hippie or the Slayer
Hippie? The Slayer Hippie.
Which is ironic that because Del from Lockjaw coined that name for him. So he was right. Yeah, he gave it. I think the Hippie Slayer was doing he was doing the door at the Satiricon or something, and Del walked in and was like, "Who's the Hippie Slayer?" Or who's the Slayer Hippie or whatever is. Yeah. So,
well, unlike some of the stuff that I was running down, I'm a massive fan of Poison Idea.
Oh yeah, me too.
I think they're like as good as it gets for that kind of music, and they're kind of sort of have that nihilistic intelligence that the drums have, obviously, and the music was just like, ugh. I believe that way more than I believe the Cro-Mags or any of the other Judge or whatever. I don't know if I can necessarily endorse their lifestyle, but I totally believe it 100%. So
I'm right there with you. So yeah.
So you're going to be playing shows once people can live again and record with Lockjaw in the future?
We're rehearsing already, so
cool.
we'll record here in a couple months, and this is Lockjaw. I think we'll probably play a couple of shows. I know we're definitely playing in Portland in October, so that'll be interesting. Because the band was at least the band was effectively banned like in the mid 80s, pretty much, from playing anywhere in town. So we'll see what happens. If people are going to remember that my bandmates seem to think that people in Portland will remember that stuff, so that we might have some problems, but we'll see. I don't think so. I'm like, whatever. Like,
people have a long memory for pointing out other people's faults.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, this was the whole. There was a skinhead got murdered, or some skinheads murdered somebody coming out of a gay club. Some like East Indian, some guy from like India, and one of the skinheads had a Lockjaw T-shirt on, and it made like national news.
So it's kind of like the same thing as
associate
the Night Stalker with his AC/DC hat, and
right, or the Judas Priest like suicide thing, like he was listening. Yeah, so it's kind of like guilt by association. That made national news though. So and then you have the whole Courtney Love scene report thing, and Maximum Rock and Roll say that Lockjaw were Nazis. And
wait a second. This is a great way to end this conversation. Courtney Love wrote a scene report for Maximum.
When she lived in Portland, she was doing a scene report for Maximum Rock and Roll, and apparently she basically was ragging on Lockjaw, saying they were Nazis and all this type of thing. So I think Lockjaw were more. They were kind of just more like, it was kind of like Poison Idea. They were just nihilists
that drank a lot of beer.
Yeah, they didn't give a fuck about anything really. Like, right? It was kind of.
So Courtney Love kicked Lockjaw out of the scene after her scene.
Yeah, basically, or tried to, but yeah. I mean, Lockjaw were pretty much Poison Idea's little brother band for like a couple of years, like pretty much. So neither one of them toured. They couldn't get their shit together. So
what I knew about Portland back then, to this day, that's still, I think, sort of what I think is it was all about Poison Idea and the Wipers.
Well, yeah.
No offense to all the other great bands in Portland.
Of course, the Wipers bailed like pretty quickly. Like, I think they moved to New York they went to New York in like 78, like something like that. And then they ended up in like, I think Greg Sage is in like Tucson now. So,
what an interesting guy that guy is.
Yeah. We ran into him. We ran into him on the Hard Times tour. And,
what was that?
In Arizona. Well, Larissa's amp blew up like the last song or something. So we needed to get an amp fixed, and he was fixing amps basically. So we ended up hanging out with him like the next morning for like 4 or 5 hours while he fixed the amp. So super nice guy. So
awesome.
The Necros were label mates with the Wipers at some point.
That's right, because they had all those records on like Fall Line and all those the latter period where it was more chill but still good.
The Wipers, the Necros, and the Dead Milkmen, all on the same label, right? And the Flaming Lips. So,